How wonderful to sit here and see you, to be together. And hello, those of you on Zoom. So, welcome. Sunday the 21st of April, 2024. Something happening. I am going to relinquish this seat for a few moments and ask Paul to come up and do our welcoming and land acknowledgement.
I'm doing a couple of different jobs here this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm also doing the camera and the audio, and so I can't split myself in two, so I just have to kind of sit here, and hopefully the camera will get me. We're doing the broadcast to Zoom for those of you who are new here today. We have what we call the hybrid Sangha in place, and this started mostly during COVID. We were broadcasting beforehand, and we've developed this really beautiful relationship with almost an equal number of folks who are not able to come in. Some are local, some are far away. And as you can see, we have quite the extended Sangha here. And this is important to us to keep this going. And it's important because we've set this intention for welcome. We welcome everyone. We study together and practice for the benefit of all beings and this living earth. We recognize the suffering caused by biases, prejudices, systems of power, privilege, and oppression based on race, sex, class, age, ethnicity, religion, national origin, ability, sexual orientation, and gender identity or expression. We aspire to do no harm and to dismantle barriers that cause separation and suffering, recognizing that our liberation is interconnected with the liberation of all. Portland Insight Meditation Center recognizes and honors the indigenous peoples of this region on whose ancestral lands this center now stands. These include the Clackamas, Multnomah, Chinook, and many other tribes of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz. These and many other Native communities made their homes at the confluence of the Willamette and the Columbia Rivers for over 11,000 years. We want to recognize that Portland today is a community of many diverse Native peoples who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all indigenous communities, past, present, future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks for being the electronic wizard. Why are you here? It's Sunday morning. It's a beautiful sunny day. You could be working in your garden or skiing or going for a walk with a friend, or this must be pretty important for you. Same with you on Zoom. So what's important about it? Why are you here? There's something in us. Here's a book I want to remember to look at. I bought it years ago on a recommendation of a teacher. It's been on my bookcase like a bunch of them. Carl Fried Graf von Durkheim, who I just discovered has a lot of stuff on YouTube too, from a while ago. Anyway, the book is called The Call from Within. Is it true that there's something in you that's saying, hey, come home. Stop for a while. Come inward. Tune your consciousness toward what's happening inside your own being and less toward all the multi-variegated, I call them in my own life the consolation prizes. The consolation prizes that all exist in time, hence they're coming into being and disappearing. And after Jim is done with the movement, I'm going to speak today about impermanence, a particular slant on the truth of anicca. So I invite you to stick around for that. "2,600 years ago, an ordinary human being I did that quite intentionally, being aware of reaching. Every now and then these days I have a tremor. It's new. And it's not, oh, there it is. There it is. And then it's very minor. I have a friend who has quite a big tremor. Something's happening. My body is breaking down. It's part of the truth of impermanence. Right? First symptoms. So anyway, 2,600 years ago, Siddhartha Gautama, a young, very wealthy, a prince-like person, discovered that the world was unstable in ways he hadn't noticed before, like birth, sickness, old age, decay, and death. And he set off on a quest. And he arrived at what he was seeking, which was an answer to the issues of birth, sickness, old age, decay, and death. And here we are, 2,600 years ago, practicing in precisely the way that he taught. And millions and millions and millions of people have done this before us. So we're in good company. So I invite those of you on Zoom as well, find a comfortable position, comfortably upright. The classic text says, the person seeking awakening goes to a quiet spot, perhaps an abandoned house, perhaps a place outdoors. They sit down comfortably upright, and placing mindfulness before them, they abandon covetousness and greed concerning the world. They abandon the past and future and determine, I'm going to sit here for a while and watch what happens. I intend to sit here for a while and be awake. What does that mean, to be awake? It's somehow synonymous with knowing what's happening externally and internally. So what's happening that our sense doors speak of, hearing, sound, internally, hearing, internally, thoughts. So please, come here, feel your body where it touches the chair. Notice the life in what you think of as your hands. You don't have to do anything except be aware. Be aware. Notice, perhaps, that this body is breathing. We take breathing pretty much for granted. But of course, it's not permanent. Each breath provides a home base for awareness. It also provides an exquisite teaching of the coming and going of all things. Each breath has a beginning, a rising to fullness, a changing of direction, a decline, and then a vanishing. It's quite likely that you've already experienced some wandering mind. Most people on the earth don't even know their mind wanders. And that means that we, in that circumstance, are identified with our thoughts. And the mind can think anything. It's been conditioned to have all kinds of attitudes affected by ideology, advertising, our parents. Coming home to the present moment, coming home to breathing, somehow has us step out of our conditioning, step into some freedom. And so, with the greatest of kindness and no hint of violence or coercion, we sit together and moment by moment awaken in now, in the sensations of breathing, in waking up from a wandering mind. In acknowledging the tingling, vibrating aliveness, which is the body. The places of pain in the body. There are many, many techniques and strategies. One very powerful one comes from the Mahasi Sayadaw, a great teacher of the last century in Burma. And he encouraged us to notice, to make little mental notes on the in-breathing, rising, rising of the chest and abdomen, on the out-breathing, falling, falling. Just a little tiny note. It's not a big preoccupation. Then when there's awakening from a wandering mind, the mental note wandering, wandering, returning, returning, coming home to the breathing. And maybe your mind is conditioned to worry. Whenever there is awakening to worry, you simply note worrying, worrying. Or maybe it's a judgmental mind, judging oneself or others. Judging, judging. We don't have to stop anything from happening. It's already over when we notice it. But we are cultivating this mysterious awareness, knowing of breathing, knowing of thinking, knowing of hearing. And so we rest our way, we incline our hearts toward the present moment. The word for meditation in Pali, the language of the Buddha, is bhavana. And it means to cultivate. This afternoon, I plan to spend a little time cultivating my garden at home. It means removing weeds, breaking up the soil, adding some fertilizer, compost, checking the irrigation system, putting in little plants. Meditation's the same. We are cultivating the garden of our hearts. We are awakening to and restraining the wandering mind. And we learn to be aware of hatred and jealousy and greed and fear and not feed it. And right here, we're cultivating awareness, concentration, patience, kindness, the habit of turning inward. And it's all done with no violence. Is there anywhere in the body that there is unnecessary tension? Maybe in your forehead, maybe in your cheeks, your jaw. Oftentimes we hold tension deep in the gut. Maybe you can just let that go, practicing soft belly. Why not? And at least every now and then, awareness opens in the beginning of a breath. Right here, right now. Mhm. Before too long, usually, discomforts arise in the body. We find ourselves with an itch or an ache. And we do something very unusual for humans. And that is that we form the intention to not move. And this can build up quite a lot of tension sometimes. And it's the development in us of the capacity to bear things, to not have to react to things. It's the capacity of freedom. So sometimes when we have chosen to sit still, we might take the itch or the ache or the pain as what's called a secondary object. We would take awareness there, we don't have to try to avoid it. Instead, we embrace the discomfort, the itch, the broken heart, the sadness. And we begin with the simplicity of the breath and the relative simplicity of observing thoughts. But there's no reason we can't also notice the mood that's present. Some of us suffer with depression or anxiety, fear. Once we have the meditation, we know what to do with these, which is turn toward them. We have some jargon, we say, open the heart toward it. Allowing it to exist, because it does exist. we can notice the mind which is really wanting something or not wanting something. The mind which is sleepy and dull, the mind which is crisp and wide awake, the mind which is restless and agitated. As we embrace the truth of our humanity. Please now let's for just a few moments switch to a very different practice. And in it, we actually cultivate a thought or an intention with a special mantra that says, I love you, with your name at the end. I love you with your name. If that's challenging in any way, it's really illuminating something important. I love you with your name. Maybe your name is a little child. And we can learn, this is called loving kindness meditation, metta. We can develop this and become more and more attentive to and have an attitude of love toward ourselves. And then we can add in other people. We can become a source for loving in the world. It's not difficult, it just takes some time, some devotion, some interest. And please now, let's notice the life that's in the hands. Hearing. Notice the life that's in the face. Hearing. Is someone close enough to touch this sound making? Good, thank you. Notice the life that's in the cheeks and the eyes. And now the eyes don't just open by themselves, it takes intention. And so notice the intention and then allow the eyes to open. And stay mindful because something really pretty impressive happens. Seeing and knowing it. And to the degree that you are comfortable with it, I invite you to turn around. Look around, see who's here. See yourself in your many other forms. I only have 4 biblical quotes, but there's one that I really like a lot, which is, love thy neighbor as thyself. which isn't a metaphorical statement. It's when you see them, you're seeing yourself. It's a weird thought, isn't it? It's not a weird experience. It happens every time we fall in love. I am having the absolute privilege of spending Wednesdays from 8:15 to 3 o'clock with my now almost 9-month-old granddaughter. And she blows me into the present a bunch of times a day, but every now and then, I get caught up in making a phone call or something, and I'm into the fantasy, and I look over and she's just looking at me. She's just right. It is almost like running into a wall. It's like, oh, geez, I was lost again. Quite something. She can sit now. That makes her much more dangerous. Much more dangerous. Well, I have a few announcements. The first, right here. Candle. Here it is. From Candle Summers. Tonight, the first and third Sunday night, there's Insight and Metta Practice online. Insight and Loving Kindness. Online only at 6:30. The Zoom link is under weekly groups on the website. And Women's Restoration and Rejuvenation, a new summer session sign up, opens tomorrow, Friday, the third Friday of the month for 4 months. That's also with Candle. I have more, but somehow I want to sit here for a moment first. Next weekend, at 8:45 and Friday evening, I'm picking up at the airport Mary Stankavage, who comes from LA. She's been here a couple of times. She teaches every morning on Zoom. And I don't know what to say. She is one of the more grounded human beings and Dharma teachers I've ever met. She's very practical. She's very engaging. And I highly recommend that you come next Saturday and next Sunday. She'll be teaching. Then we move on to the weekend after, May 4th, Saturday, May 4th. Betsy Toll and I are going to be here only, not online. Courage and Compassion in a Troubled Time. This work is very much inspired by Joanna Macy and her work on despair and empowerment. And this is an opportunity to come together and reflect upon and speak about those really big issues that are somewhat unspeakable, like climate change, like war and terrorism, like sickness and aging and death. So we have a wonderful, we're going to have another meeting next week to plan, but I invite you to come and do that. And it'll be, my guess is, my presumption is, my anticipation prayer is that we'll all leave it feeling much more content and much more at ease. The teacher training community with Paul involved, Saturday, June 8th. This is put it on your calendar. You get a chance. Oops, oh dear, it went there. Teacher training. And there'll be an opportunity to meet the new teachers and also to have conversation with them. Basics of mindfulness that started, and Candles, a thing I mentioned before. And there, I think that's enough. Sundays, there's Be Queer Now. There's lots of things happening. What do you do when the speaker stops speaking? I propose that there's something really wonderful and generic you can always do. I call it plopping. You can just realize, oh, and plop into your body. Just, oh, I'm here. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to pull out my phone. Imagine that. can just be here. And now I'm going to invite Jim up after I do my shaming thing that I don't know how many times I'll do it, but it's there is a tendency for some people to leave right out now or when Jim is finished. And I think that's not a great idea. Because, and this could be seen as terribly arrogant, but maybe it is. Because what I'm going to talk about today is actually life-changing and revolutionary and can lead to a lot less suffering in your life and the people around you. Because these are the teachings from the Buddha. These are not idle thoughts. These are not some philosophical fantasy. These are about the way it works and where happiness comes from. So there. Jim, you want to come up and do some movement and mindfulness? This is Jim Dalton. We've been friends for 104 years, which says nothing about our age, of course.
I have this little spot here. I'm supposed to stand. Paul's also a stage manager. He gets me into the right place. So, how many people are not familiar with Qigong? Wow. When I started doing this, that was not the case. So, and you know that Qigong is a way of discovering those points of tension in the body. And by moving gently and expansively, we can soften those difficult tightness and stressful things. And Robert's talking about impermanence in his talk in a few minutes. Qigong is all about impermanence. We raise our hands and we get to the point of fulfillment, and then we release, and there's a little empty space, stillness and silence. Each gesture has this same opportunity to explore what's tight and release it, but also become aware that all conditioned things are impermanent. You can't continue going up forever, and then you can't continue going down forever. There's this little point of exchange. We have to stop and be still just for a millisecond in order to finish the gesture. And recognizing that in this body, builds awareness of all the impermanence in the room. There's no one not participating, even if they're not doing the gesture. They're breathing. The Buddha used the breath as a teaching tool because it rises, fulfills itself, and releases. We begin to see this everywhere. And we can call this, painting a rainbow, which is pleasant image, rising, separating clouds, another pleasant image. But it takes effort to follow through all the steps in order to feel that release. Pushing and pulling. Everything we do comes to an end. But there's an opportunity to be aware of all the micro movements that get us into that fulfillment. Open the shoulder socket as long as it's healthy for us, beneficial for us. We lift a heel and set it down. We lift the other heel, setting it down. We're working together, discovering how to let go of tension. We're part of a mass movement here, doing something beneficial together. Maybe the only time this week that that's happening for some people. All right, let's look at the moon through the hands here, gazing at the moon over here. Pressing across. Aware of change in this body and in the movement of the whole group. And then going into my favorite move, which is wave hands like clouds. One hand is representing heavens. The other hand is shadow of the cloud on the earth. The earth is breathing. And then opening. What is this? A shopping list. Coming to stillness, dropping all the gestures, just aware of breathing, resting, releasing any tension that's still vibrating quietly in some corner. And I hope that was beneficial for your nervous system. Thank you very much for joining me.
This morning, all over Thailand, all over Burma, monks carried a bowl. It has a top. They walked along the street. This is even in the cities, the downtowns. This happens. They walk along, and then when someone is there to offer them food, they take the lid off. The person puts the food in, and they walk on. They don't acknowledge. They don't bow or say thank you. They just receive, and that's their food for the day. And by design, from the time of the Buddha, the Theravadan monks, anyway, are mendicant, meaning, among other things, they can't store food from one day to the next. And it means you better stay available to and be of service to the people of your community. Otherwise, you're not going to get to eat the next day. It's an incredible interconnection. And I have that here. This was mine in Burma 30 years ago or so, and it's a symbol. You can also put donations in there. There's a wood box back there, but more functionally, really, you can go online and become a monthly donor. And the question is this? I'm going to ask you not to lie down, if you will. It's an interesting thing about lying down. It's a piece of the tradition that again in Burma and Thailand, no one would think to lie down in a Dharma hall. There's another thing which also I don't subscribe to, which is you never ever point your feet toward the Buddha. And if you do, and if you're a Westerner and you do, someone will come and tell you, it's like, no, we don't do that. However, if you're hurting and you need to lie down because of back issues, then lie down. It's not magic, it's just respect. And also, chances are you'll be more awake. But Dana, this place runs on your Dana. It's everything is by donation. When we have workshops and so on, there's a suggested donation, but you can actually send an email and come at no charge, or give yourself any scholarship you want. Classic from the teachings of the Buddha. There, I forgot to do that before. My drive from Beaverton takes me along Multnomah Boulevard for about 4 miles. And there's a practice that I really enjoy, and I do pretty frequently. I used to always drive with the radio on, and then I realized that was supporting being unconscious. And so I started doing a practice that I learned here, actually, from a guy called Richard Lang, who teaches the headless way. And the practice goes like this. And we can do it here, but it's less exciting in a way. To be here and become aware of seeing. And then when you're driving, the world comes rushing toward you. It comes rushing toward you, like a tree comes on the side of the road and then it's gone. Or a pedestrian beside the road, they come, and where do they go? Well, we would say, of course, well, they're still there, but my experience is they just disappear. And this is a bit of a reach, but let's try it for a moment. Please look at this face. And this interaction between you and me, how many faces do you experience? I'd like to propose there's only one, and it's this one. Because what's at your end? Awareness. Now, that can sound just kind of weird, but if you grok it, to use a generational term, if you get it for a moment, it's quite a shock because it points out very directly, what are you really? You're a field of awareness. The body is an object of that field of awareness, but it's not who you are. Not for long, anyway. So I want to talk about anicca, impermanence, which is one of the three characteristics of existence. How do I enter this? One of the things that struck me profoundly about Buddhism when I encountered it in India in 1971 was that there was nothing to believe. I grew up in Catholicism and we had the creed, you must believe this. But the Buddha was really a scientist. He followed a very straightforward scientific method, which goes essentially like this. If and when you discover that you're suffering, how closely can you pay attention to it? Like you have a toothache, can you bring your awareness into that toothache and really be there and experience the suffering? Or maybe maybe someone died and your heart's breaking and you're really sad. Maybe you're angry. Do you have the capacity in your mind to turn toward that suffering? There's so many things to do not to turn toward it, right? We can binge watch, we can use various substances, we can overwork, we can do all kinds of things, and we do. And our entire entertainment values system in our culture is all about that. Stay in trance, stay in trance. So we can do that. But if you can develop a mind which has enough concentration and mindfulness and a few other things to carry out the experience, the experiment, what's really happening here? Who's suffering? So if we want to be a scientist, we develop something like the Webb telescope, or we develop the electron microscope, and it's funny. This mind goes to personal experience. Always, I'm tiptoeing toward having a surgery on my back, and I needed my wonderful physician said he wanted me to have a SPECT scan. So I went in the morning and they shot me up with a little radioactive substance. And then I went back at noon and went in one of these big machines. They're so amazing, right? It was clunking and this and that. And they're going to get a very clear image of my lumbar spine to see if there's cancer, but also it reveals any cracks or wherever the growing has happened in the bone. Pretty highly developed, remarkable machine, science. Well, we can develop, we can develop the capacity to concentrate and be one-pointed beyond anything Western psychology even fantasizes. We can also learn to be awake and aware in all kinds of circumstances, and therefore to see what's actually happening up close. Outside our propaganda, outside our belief systems, just what's the facts. So the Buddha went on from there to say that the universe of our existence, of our experience and existence, rests upon three characteristics, no matter what it is. Everything on this side of the Big Bang, and that is a fascinating story, isn't it? 14.2 billion years ago, there was nothing, and then there was everything. What do you make of that? It's weird. Galaxies, planets, civilizations, species. It's hard to wrap it's impossible to wrap one's head around. So that happened. Then it's continued, and it continues to this day, to this moment, to the fact that you were conceived, born, went through somebody training, and you're here today, and you're very convinced that you're somebody. And most probably, unless you've done a lot of introspection, there's a part of you that is scared to death of death, right? That we're scared to commit into being really intimate with each other because this person could disappear, will disappear, actually, ultimately. So the Buddha, in his own experimentation, discovered that all things are impermanent. It's a huge statement. All things, everything. Everything. Governments, species, planets, solar systems, relationships. Pause. The route that I take here goes through a couple of back streets, and there is on one of these corners an absolutely glorious pink dogwood tree. It is in complete, utter. As I approached it, being very present and mindful, I saw it appear coming around the corner, and I'd been watching it getting close to blossoming. And this, anyway, I was going slowly, maybe 20 miles an hour, and I watched as it came into view, as it was stunning, as the mind made comments about it, and then as it disappeared behind me. And I was thinking of this talk, and I was saying, well, there's anicca, right? There it is. Funny thought. It was a bit like my first marriage. There it was, and it went boom. Children, and then it went boom, back, gone. That's wild, right? So anicca. And one of the experiments that the Buddha suggests in however we're practicing our mindfulness, paying attention to breathing or mood states or images that arise in the mind, is to have in the back sort of, or in the hip pocket of one's practice, what's this telling me about impermanence? What's in the experiment of this moment, notice this voice. A word comes into being, and it's happening all the time. Our experience is momentary. Now, why is that important? One of the main ways we suffer is because things are always changing. You know, we finally get the right job or the right partner or the right something or the right hairdresser or the right somebody. Right now, I have the right doctors. I know they're going to do what the ones before them have done, which is retire. But right now, it's great. And however, I am sort of prepared when I get that letter that says Dr. So-and-so is no longer going to be practicing. And it's like, oh, I have to start again somewhere. So, anicca. What if it were possible to be so attentive to anicca that we realize that even this that I think of as myself is going to change, is changing all the time, it is impermanent. And then when it goes, when it disappears, when the person disappears, when the job disappears, when you go out that morning to start the car and you have a really important meeting to go to, really maybe very important, and then it goes click, 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 click. There's one response which just says, no, how could this happen? Another response, which becomes more and more common for us, is, of course. What an interesting conjunction of things that it happens to be this day. So anicca, and I want to come back there, but oh good, I got time. The second characteristic of existence for us to check, to study, the Buddha called dukkha, and it's the first thing he taught. That fabric thing on the wall back there is actually the story of the first teaching he did. It's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the putting in motion the wheel of the Dharma. And he found his 5 friends that he'd been seeking freedom with. And he said, I found it, you guys. And the first thing he said was, life is dukkha. There's something in life which is deeply disappointing. Even for the multi-billionaires, or maybe especially in a way. Even for the poorest of the poor, even for everybody, because everything's always changing. We don't reach somewhere. We don't reach somewhere. I thought so strongly when I was younger that someday I'm going to get enlightened. Someday I'm going to get somewhere, and then I'll be okay. I'll be safe. And there is some truth about waking up. The more one wakes up to reality, the less suffering there is. But everything does keep changing. And then the third characteristic of existence, and any one of these would be worth a week of reflecting on and practicing, but just to give you the context, the third characteristic is anatta, which literally means non-soul. Now, to those of you with a Christian background, what does that mean? No soul? And people hear that sometimes and think, oh no, I don't want to discover that I don't have a self. But what if the prize for realizing that was to realize that you are deathless? That you don't need to suffer anymore. And that as things get pulled out from under your feet, that it's just fine, because that's the way it is. It's a strange way of thinking. And how does one, quote, get there? Well, one observes more and more precisely. This thought arises, that thought arises, this experience arises, this government arises, this, and they keep arising, and nowhere in there do I ever find a self. I'm amazed at watching, not so amazed anymore because it's happened so many times, but to watch that day when I am so competent. I mean, I'm a wizard on getting emails answered and so on, and the mood is very scintillating and bright, and then the next day, I can hardly find my office. What's going on here? Right? And I see emails come in, it's like, oh no, I can't. Who's minding the store? He's so unstable, this Robert Beatty guy. So, anicca. Oh, that's interesting. Close. 9%. Let me just plug this in because I'm going to want it in a minute. Do I need this? Do I need this? No. I can put it here. In fact, maybe I don't need it. Let me think. Yeah. Anicca. Let's try a little experiment together. Please allow your right hand to rise like this. And now let it feel, inhabit it. And maybe let your fingers go broad like this. Well, there's the tremor. And then stretch. And then let that relax. Wow. And then let it go out to the right. And be aware of its changingness. And maybe let it go up high. It's changing. Down. And maybe let's let the other hand come out. And let them face one another. And sometime in the next 10 or 15 seconds, let them clap. Notice how the decision is made when to do that. And maybe do it 2 or 3 times. And now letting your hands slowly go down. Did you notice any change in that? It's nothing but change. That's anicca. And thinking about it is one thing, but having a deep, intuitive moment of awareness of that can actually transform our lives. Because somehow the truth of it will become really in. And that's what the Buddhists call insight. There's psychological insight, which is, why are my relationships like this? Well, I can look back at my childhood and see, well, of course they're like this, because this is the conditioning I went through. These are the traumas I experienced. These are the benefits I had. But there's another kind of insight, which is what the Buddha talked about as insight, which is those realizations that, anicca is really true. Right? Anicca is really true. And then when things change, we're profoundly less disturbed. And there's a song I want to sing. I approach it with a little trepidation. I haven't been playing much lately. And though some of you have heard, I had a big aha not so long ago. It's kind of funny. I decided that I'm a musician. I'm not a very good musician. I'm not like any of those people I see on or hear on the recordings. But so what? Right? So what? So, can you hear that out there? How about we use this for an anicca lesson? You ready? What does that have in common with this? If we looked at an oscilloscope, we could see that it went like this. It goes boom, the attack as they call it, and then it trails off. And then it's gone. So what about this? There's nothing to think about, right? It's rather brief, isn't it? The highest note on the guitar. Oh no, actually there's a higher note up here. Or they all follow the same pattern, beginning and ending. And now, here's the song. I heard this first 60 years ago in the Place des Arts in Montreal. Harry Belafonte was on the upswing. He had with him, how many of you know Nana Mouskouri? Wow, isn't that something? Not a person. If you can remember that word, I invite you to listen. She was Greek. Maybe she's still alive. Probably not. He took her on tour with him, and all of a sudden she was an international famous person. Anyway, this song he played, and I remember it from then. It's all come true. I have a daughter. I have a granddaughter. This is a song about my daughter. Can I play it without crying? That's the issue. Where are you going, my little one, my little one? Where are you? Where are you going, my little one, my little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? Turn around and you're two. Turn around and you're four. Turn around, you're a young girl going out of the door. Turn around, turn around, turn around, you're a young girl going out of my door. You recognize this, parents? Where are you going, my little one, my little one? Dimgees and petticoats, where have you gone? Turn around and you're tiny, turn around and you're grown. Turn around, you're a young wife with babes of your own. Turn around, turn around, turn around, you're a young wife with babes of your own. Where are you going, my little one, my little one, little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? Where are you going, my little one, my little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? A song came, went. I saw an interview a couple of years ago with Harry Belafonte, who was 100 years old. Very clear hair, still very clear-headed. And it was basically his goodbye interview. He's gone. How do we live? How do we live happily and engaged with each other? And creatively, generatively. How do we live and face directly into the fact of anicca? It's the way of profound acceptance, utter acceptance. And it doesn't mean that we don't do what we can to relieve the suffering of each other and the world. Sometimes people say, oh, this Buddhist training with all this emphasis on acceptance is really a cop-out, and actually quite not. There may well come times in our lives when we have to put our life on the line. Right? We might be at a circumstance, I think, somewhat frequently, of those that incident on the Max a couple of 3 years ago with a very crazy person who was out to do this, and there were three. He, the crazy person, was harassing two Muslim girls on the train, and these men stood up, and he killed them all. Now I would stand up. No way, I'm not going to stand up. But it's interesting, because it might mean that standing up would be at a high cost. So let me see. There was a couple of other things I wanted to be sure to touch. Anicca. How about this? Please join me and let your eyes close. Notice the anicca in that, gone. Vision's gone. And then feel the life in your hands and arms. What's happening there? Can you feel it? It's nothing but change. It's the essence of life. It's just changing right in your consciousness. And then your mind wanders. You didn't choose to have it wander, it just wanders. And then mindfulness awakens. And then the wandering mind has stopped, and then you can be right here in your hands. Anicca. Maybe, why not conjure up an image from the best vacation you ever had? Or maybe the most beautiful place you've ever been. Now, that experience is over, but this imagination of it is also over as soon as it comes and goes. And please now let your eyes open, or notice what it takes to open your eyes. And then notice seeing. My wife took me to New Orleans to visit her places that she loved. She went to school there, and she's been going back to the jazz festival every year for 20 years. So we went and had a wonderful time. The music was incredible. And then it came the morning for me to leave, and we got up and we went in the taxi, and we went to the big hotel where her friend that she usually goes with was staying. She got out of the taxi, and then she, I can find it. We had a momentary kiss, and then she jumped on the plane. Or I jumped on the plane, rather. She went upstairs, and see if it's here. It'd be nice if I knew it by heart, but my mind just doesn't do that very well anymore. Here we are. And I'm on the plane, and I'm looking. I love to get a window seat, and I watch outside. And somewhere between Kansas City and here, we were crossing the Rockies. It was beautiful mountains, and snowy. I went back to the restroom, and on the way back from the restroom, this poem came to me. Almost complete. People sleep, watch videos, play games on screens, and sip at wine. Flying west over snow-covered mountains, a chasm opened, or perhaps just revealed itself with a taxi goodbye kiss. That moment of looking away, one plane change ago, it's always the same. Here, and then not here. It's that simple. Those moments that we actually have when we can touch, hear, see, and smell one another are all we really have. The stakes are high, aren't they? Either we connect and love one another now, or not at all. Those moments that we actually have when we can touch, hear, see, and smell one another are all we really have. The stakes are high, aren't they? Either we connect and love one another now, or not at all. So my hope by speaking like this is that there'll be a brand new thread in your practice, and that 20 times a day you'll start noticing anicca. I know early on in my training, I did a 2-month meditation retreat. It was 2 months of at least 12 hours a day of sitting and walking. Solo. There was another fellow came for 10 days in the middle of it, but other than that, I had my teacher and a couple of other people around, but I was just day after day of this sitting and walking, and it was very challenging. I hadn't done any therapy, so all hell broke loose a bunch of times. But I remember after the retreat, I went for a walk. I went for a walk with my teacher, and he said, "Well, what did you learn?" And I said, "Oh my God, my mind is unstable. I mean, really, it's really crazy. And everything's changing." And he said, "Well, that's a success. You had a very successful 2 months to have had your life for this to become so obvious." And in particular, I hope that when something doesn't work out the way you wanted, or when something really works out the way you wanted and then it changes, that a first thought might be, "Oh, this is anicca." It's a long time ago now, what we call 9/11. I was camping on a small island in British Columbia. And we had befriended some oyster farmers. And Roger came across in his big boat pretty early in the morning. And he'd never done that before. And he said, "Something really bad has happened in the world. And you should come over with me." And I decided, we asked him what it was, and he said, and I decided I would row the boat over so that later we could come back easily. And then I walked into his living room, and for the first time, I saw the towers fall. My first thought was, anicca. My second thought, what will Americans do? And sadly, we chose revenge. But anicca, I'd walked in those buildings. Poof, gone. So my guess is that there will be poof, gone in your life before long. I mean, really, it happens walking out the door, but there will be some circumstance when that happens, and you will know now, you'll have an incredibly powerful tool, which is, all right, this is the way it is. And maybe I should take a deep breath. How do I want to respond to this collapsing tower of my life? Shall I respond with love? Shall I respond with panic? Shall I respond with aggression? How do I want to do it? So this isn't idle thought. It really is an invitation to be much more alive and to be really scientists. What is it to be alive? So we have a little while. If anyone has any question or comment, you folks on Zoom can unmute and speak if you want. And those in the room, if you have anything to contribute, how have you experienced impermanence lately? Would be a good one. If you'd come up and then take the microphone. Are you coming? Oh, you're going to be the pastor. Okay. I know. But it's getting better. Your foot is getting better. Yeah. All right. How have you learned about impermanence lately?
I could start off with a question.
Oh, well,
And-
might not have. Let me speak of that. The Buddha didn't talk about getting enlightened. He never used a word anything like that. He said that it's possible to experience the deathless. What could he possibly mean? There's a Zen koan practice in Japanese Zen. They develop these whole series of questions which totally confound the mind. They confuse the mind to bits. And they provoke, they call it satori in Zen Buddhism. They provoke a kind of radical waking up. And one of them is, what was your face before you were born? Take that and reflect on it for 10 or 15 hours a day, for a week or 2 or 3. See what it does. What was your... There's another one that I've actually practiced, which was a monk walks up to Joshu and says, Joshu, does a dog have Buddha nature? Joshu answered, Moo. Take moo into your belly like a red hot ball of iron. Does a dog have Buddha nature? What is it? It just kind of blows up the rational mind. But then there's another track that I have a friend, Hal McCarter, lives in town here. He's 92. And he's a remarkably awake guy. Had profound awakening a few years ago. He's a fellow who was an internist, a psychiatrist, and then he retired and started an artificial intelligence company for 10 years. And then he quit that, and then he went to art school for 4 years. And then he was an artist. He's a beautiful art. And then he woke up a few years ago. And this is one of his poems, which speaks to this. What can I say? Being was everywhere. I didn't see it. I passed right by on my way elsewhere. I was sure I was separate from the world out there. And sure, I created all these thoughts, and sure, I chose whatever I did. Then one day, sitting in my living room, I noticed something, a seemingly small thing, just there was no me there. No one watching my experience. All that was here was this experience, out loud laughable. How could it be this simple? And so everything changed. I found no me separate from the world to choose what I do. No me to author my thoughts. I saw this is it. I am this experience. There's no one here to run the show. Biology and conditioning handle it all. Thoughts occur, behavior happens, preferences are expressed. A separate me pulling the strings is an illusion. Being surrounds us. Few see it. I notice hollyhocks are present. I greet them. I find crows and ferns lounging in being, and I say hello. I see things as they are, just this, right here, right now. Sometimes I'm sad to see so much folly. There are times I dip an oar in when I see I might help. Being is always here, whenever I am present. Occasionally, love just happens, unexpected, quiet, transient. The enormity of being, what can I say? What if they're not just as a theory and a fantasy, but what if it became obvious to you that thoughts think themselves, that emotions emote themselves, that there's no you here pulling the strings? That's the promise of all the spiritual traditions. You know, the Catholic mystics, they came up with this discovery and wording, which was that God and I are one. And then they had to be burned because when that's the case, there's no need for priests. There's just the direct experience of I am this. So that's the best I can do with that. It's this, we have this, every person in this room has a fantastic life story. Fantastic in a variety of ways. Fantastic also in that it's mostly imagined. And it's not very closely related to what actually happened. There's been some marvelous research done on that over the last 35 years. They've had people come in every 5 years and tell their life story, and they change radically. But we think this really happened. They did this, but the self is a construct. We're constructing it. And what if even just for a tenth of a second, we could realize, oh, number one, the past is over. Number two, it's a story. I just had a memory of speaking with Hal. He said, there was a day when it just became clear to me, there's no one here. That means there's no one there either. What sense does it make to hold on to resentments against someone who isn't there? It can sound like crazy thinking, but what if that's true? Gone. Resentments are gone. The impulse for revenge is gone. Now, is this just fantasy? I don't believe so. Because we can experience this. It's not something that just the Buddha had. In fact, he spent 42 years after his awakening going around the country teaching, developing teachers, and also teaching this so that other people could have the experience of suffering diminishing and then stopping, and of love burgeoning. It's a good word, burgeoning. Those trees are burgeoning, aren't they? Those dogwood trees. So, any other comment or question?